Knock, knock.
Hi, listeners. Hang on, I've interrupted you. Someone's at the door. Who's there?
Yeah. Howard.
Howard who?
How would I know?
Oh. I can tell you who is at the door, and it's our guest today. We're just going to get straight into this. I'm going to move on so I don't incriminate myself further. While Coxie dies from laughter at her own joke. Steve Rooney, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Roonz,
Pleasure, mate.
This has been a long time coming. And listeners, I'm sorry, there's dreadful lag between our internet today. So there might be a few bumping into one another. But I feel like, Roonz, you've been on the list for a long time to talk to.
Cool, I think.
I know lots of our clients are going to be pretty excited to be hearing from you today. Is it intimidating sitting on the other side of the microphones?
Not really, because I'm just pretending it's a normal Zoom meeting.
It's like any coaching session or any other time we have a chat.
Yeah, it's no different.
Virtual boxing match.
Yeah.
No one listens anyway. So, yeah, the lag's going to be awesome. Probably because I'm all the way down here in Tasmania. Steve's in country Victoria, and Coxie's up in banana bending country. So the internet waves have got to travel like extra far today.
I don't know how they're coping.
Steve, you are one of our longest standing, I won't say serving because it sounds like punishment, one of our longest standing Tradiepreneur clients. And you got an interesting story, although you probably don't think so. You have a landscaping business and you do live in country Victoria. Have you always lived regional Australia?
Yes, I was born in Essendon in Melbourne. And Mum and Dad moved us and my sister and I up here early 1983, and I've been here since.
Wow, okay. So do you get to call yourself a local yet?
Yes, I've seen the creek flood 7 times in the last 3 months, so that equates to being
qualifies.
equates to being a local. Normally it's 7 times in a lifetime, but yeah, a lifetime was last year.
It probably feels like it for you a bit too, mate.
Almost, yes.
I'm sure we'll unpack that a little bit more, Roonz, which is our affectionate nickname for you here.
Yeah.
Now, listeners, Steve is in. Oh, should we say where you are in case you get like fans coming and knocking on your door or something?
Oh, the more the merrier.
I don't know if we normally give away our guests' place of residence. We won't give them your specific address so they can come and look at your sexy new house.
No, can't do that.
But Steve's in Bendigo, so I always find that an interesting place to have a landscaping business because my recollection of Bendigo is that it's hard and dry and fairly uninspiring. Sorry to anybody who lives in Bendigo.
Yes, very hard. We don't use post-hole shovels here. We have to go first. Usually with heavy machinery, dynamite, something like that, whatever it takes to plant a tree.
Yeah, and that's just to put tube stocks in.
Yeah, just to put tube stock in. But yeah, usually quite dry, except for the last, I won't say 12 months, but it's starting to head towards that last sort of 12 months has been incredibly wet. Anyone on the Central Coast is like, not really. But for Bendigo, it's been really, really wet.
Yeah, comparatively speaking. Now, Coxie's looking at me because, and for those of you who watch these podcasts on YouTube, which I think is 2 people currently.
Our family members.
For those who don't know, we put just about all of our episodes onto our YouTube channel now. So if you're a bit of a YouTuber and it's easier to find and listen there, you can go and watch us talk to each other on YouTube, which must be absolutely freaking riveting. I know. I mean, come on. And we've got 3 beautiful people on the show today, so you should go and check us out. But I'm pretty sure Coxie was looking at me just before, like, not sure where you're going with this was.
No, this is a very different intro. But yep, let's do this nice casual thing. I like it.
Well, I'm trying not to just hook straight in and start throwing kidney punches at Steve or taking the piss. So maybe I should stop pretending and just be real.
I think we should get back to regular programming.
I'll let Coxie cut sick.
Okay, Steve. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your business, Steve?
Yeah. So in 2012, wife and I just had our first child, let's say September 2011 we did. Come into 2012, and a guy that I had working with me at my first employer give me a call, and he was sort of part-time between starting a bit of a landscape hustle on the side because he'd finished his landscaping / bricklaying tenure, moved on to other things, and then was sort of getting back into it. And we had always talked previously about starting our own business, and the drought had broken by this stage, so it was kind of like, wow, now's the time. We don't just have to put down pebbles on somebody's old lawn area anymore. So I gave notice to the employer that I had at the time. Ended up being about 20 weeks or so of notice before we actually kicked on with Living Edge. So 2 weeks into the financial year, we were off and running, and we made no money, and we had unreal fun, and we listened to music, and we made gardens, and it was actually quite good. Like, it was really good fun. We didn't exactly know what we were doing aside from actually the landscaping part of it. The rest of it was fairly blasé, and as long as we had the music going, we didn't really care. And the sun was shining because, at the time, as I said, Bendigo's pretty dry, so it doesn't rain. And it made a great time to work. We sort of stumbled across a couple of jobs, and then that kind of rolled into pretty regular work, which got more and more exciting. But due to the fact that we weren't really bringing any money in, he didn't really grab onto the business owner mindset, I suppose. He was the only breadwinner in his family, which made it really difficult when there was just nothing to drag out for either of us, which put the pressure on and ended up putting the brakes on him being part of the business, which then progressed to him finishing up. Well, actually, him deciding to finish up, and then 3 weeks later deciding, no, I haven't had enough yet. Put in another 9 months before he eventually pulled the pin on the business from there. And I got a new business partner who was not a landscaper. He was a carpenter, commercial at that, which we're not going to, talk dirty about anybody who works in commercial anything at all.
Not today.
But long story short on that one, I'm sure we might unpack that shortly, but the work ethic didn't match up with the work ethic on my side of it. And that finished up it took us 5 years for it to finish up, but that finished up really quickly. Once it started to go sour, it was, I reckon, maybe only 2 months between me having a good hard word and then a few other hard words throughout that next 2 months, and it was all over.
We started working with you just before that ended, like maybe 6 months before it ended, because I remember having some of those conversations around, well, what could it possibly look like one way or another, whether it be that you keep moving on together, and there's certainly ways to work through that if everyone's willing, or what could it look like if you separated and had the business for yourself. I guess that's probably the first thing I would absolutely love to delve into, is making that break and the circumstances for why the break needs to make us aside, because it can happen anywhere, anytime. It can happen with a marriage breakdown, or it can happen with people moving or different priorities, or, like you say, the mismatch of some of your personal and work ethics. And navigating what comes next, I think, is a really valuable lesson for most of our listeners. I'd love to talk about, Steve, with you, what that looked like for you, so that after that initial conversation and your business partner had made a decision about what they were going to do, what next? How do you begin to break it apart?
What next? I was quite excited when it first happened. That's fantastic. From there, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It was a matter of, well, my mindset became, I now get to make the decisions. I'd spent the previous pretty much 7 years, 8 years, bouncing an idea off somebody else. So being able to then decide that for example, the truck and the Bobcat were two things that I didn't want, unfortunately now they're two things that I want. At the time, there were two things that I didn't want. There was a little bit of a, there might have been a weight discrepancy in between what could be carried and what was carried. I was able to get rid of them. So my first part of being a sole company owner was that I got to make the decisions myself, which, still wrestling with now. But yeah, that was one of the key things that I got out of that initial breakup. Which, probably set us on the course that we've been on the last 3 years.
In terms of the legalities and company ownership and the structure and all, what that looked like, Steve, was that hard to navigate, or was it something that you were just able to hand back to the accountant and perhaps a solicitor and make the changes that way?
Essentially, it was handed back to the accountant to go from there. As you guys know, I'm probably a little bit too nice for my own good. Therefore, the breakup probably cost Alessa and I more than what it would have or should have, what it was worth, what I paid, etc., etc. There were a few tools that the other guys got to keep, and maybe I probably should have pushed a little bit harder and said, "Hey, we're paying this amount. You're not keeping anything." And the hard and fast of all of that is, if we hadn't sold our house just prior to it, it probably would have ceased the company.
Interesting. So it can be challenging, listeners, and essential, because it still created the change and the growth that you were looking for, Steve, because you were able to make those decisions and get the right people in place to help you with that. And I think it's important not to sugarcoat the fact that it was challenging for you to move through that process. And I also really want to focus on the nice guy thing, because it's something we see a lot in trade business owners. You're not alone, as we tell you this all the time. And I think most listeners would be sitting there nodding their heads and remembering a time when they'd given too much of themselves to avoid a conflict or an argument. And I honestly think none of us don't do this at one time or another. I think it's something that we all tend to do when we want to avoid that conflict. And hindsight's a marvelous thing, but can you remember what you were thinking at the time when the demands were being made? Was there a threat, or were you thinking I'm being a nice guy, or was what was going on in your head when you were giving in to many demands?
What was going on in my head? Pretty much I don't know. I knew Living Edge was something that I'd always said was my baby anyway. The previous two business partners weren't convenient, but they were part of the package. Could I do it by myself? Yeah, it was mine. It was my idea. We were mates, and I'm still mates with the first business partner, not so much the second. We were mates. I didn't want to necessarily lose that, but I also could see that there was going to be a bit of a divide that wasn't necessarily caused by him and I. There might have been other parties in there that might have had perhaps a bit more to do with that. So I guess, in that nice guy kind of idea, I wanted to make sure it was a little bit smooth, and as smooth as I could make it. And as smooth as I could make it was, well, I thought at the time, was pay up the demand, right or wrong. Didn't solve any problem.
Do you remember second guessing any of it as you did it, or it was just?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You did. Yeah. Okay. And how quickly did you realize that it had such a financial impact on what perhaps without the house sale would have been your future, how that would have changed that?
I guess knowing that if we hadn't have sold the house, we wouldn't have had the money to do it was
right. Yeah.
The idea that, this is financially a bit too hard, or harder than what it should have been. So I guess the impact was felt pretty much straight away, probably even before I'd actually made the transaction, really. Yeah.
So I can recall it being certainly quite a tough part of the journey. And I also recall your bounce back. Once we navigated through some of that tough stuff, the bounce back to excitement. Well, it's mine now. I can make these decisions. I can send the company in the direction that I'd like to, with creativity and flair that I wasn't able to have before. And I also remember the shift of weight. And Warwick and I are quite privy to some of the situation around that time and what happened for you there. So I'm trying not to delve too much into what I remember. But the shift in perspective for you, I think, was one of the greatest benefits, even though there was a financial impost to the change of business structure. The shift in perspective was enormous for you. And then the follow on, it was almost like a tumbleweed gathering speed and momentum really, really quickly afterwards, because it was like a cloud had been lifted and you were able to see what it was that you were after and you could chase it from there.
Yeah. Probably not to brag about you guys too much, but to go back a little bit before the split and all that kind of thing, part of the I suppose it was part of the start of the not getting along too much was I was looking for help because I knew doing business wasn't what come naturally to me. I could lay pavers around anything, but doing the business stuff wasn't natural to me, and he was a little bit resistant. Like, he wouldn't even listen to the podcast, let's be fair. And I'm like, not that hard. You just put your earphones in, stick it on the Apple CarPlay or whatever it might be, and off you go. Didn't take any time out of your day if you're driving somewhere. Listen, didn't want to do it. So certainly once that break was made, and as you said, I got to make the decisions myself, it was like, okay, cool. Now, because I'd already found you two, and I'd be like, I actually know, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know where I need to go to get to know what I'm doing. So yeah, I suppose that, as you said, that cloud of dust was lifted reasonably quickly, because I knew that, okay, you're kind of still doing business by myself. Wife is a sounding board, but there was good instruction there.
You're one of our, perhaps not rarer, but we have you're in the minority of clients where you are doing business with your wife's support and not with her joining you in the business as much. Whereas many of our clients have a husband and wife duo team running the business together. Do you find, every relationship and marriage is different? I no longer work with my husband. I help him out a little bit, but for the most part, I stay out of it because we work better like that. We actually work far better in our own separate entities than we do working together, and we did try it. Can you imagine a time where perhaps your wife will come and join you within the company and you work together, or is that something that might not be on the cards for you guys?
It was never necessarily on the cards. In saying that, after conference last year, she was much more open to it than previously. I guess there's a little bit of, what do I do? I'm a teacher. I don't know how to run a business kind of thing that goes with that. But if she doesn't want to, then I'm not going to make her either.
Yeah, of course.
She might be good at teaching. She might be really good at telling me what to do. I might cruise on and listen to music.
Are you a nice guy when it comes to discussions at home, mate?
Yeah, our discussions are pretty good. Yes, I'm always nice.
It's something, and I don't want to press on it with you, Steve, and I do because it's such a it is such a prevalent paradigm out there with tradies, trade business owners, and especially with the dudes. It fascinates me. And I can put my hand up and say it's been a thing for me over the years as well. And the way it's played out for me is I tend to be nice, in inverted commas. The problem is that it ends up sort of bottling up and then internalizing the stress, and then I either feel the effects of that personally through health or headspace or whatever, or part of my old patterning, which fortunately is different these days, was that I would just explode at stuff. And it was from being nice to all those other people who I probably shouldn't have been nice to. And then I'd explode at people who probably didn't deserve that in the end. And I wonder, with you, Steve, and the work that you've been doing on yourself, because it's nice that you give us accolades here as coaches here at Tradies in Business, but you've done a hell of a lot of work on yourself. You've done lots of self-reflection, and you've I think you've turned up to every single session bar like 3 over the last however many years we've been working together. So you've incredibly committed to your self-work. But I wonder where that nice guy thing comes from for you. You know, do you recognise a time where that started? Because a lot of guys, I think, struggle to figure out, well, I don't even know where it bloody comes from, so how can I change it?
Where it started, I don't think I've got a necessarily point in time. I know we've spoken about the chopping board incident from my 21st birthday. That's the notable time of my life where I'm like, okay, right. So clearly I've been identified as somebody who is somewhat indestructible to something that's stabbing and cutting or whatever. But also, as you've mentioned, that you still scratch a chopping board and they cut pretty deep sometimes, which essentially has been what the next 21 years has been like. But more so in that last probably, I suppose, last 3 to 4 years, 3 years with you guys, and a year or so leading up to that, knowing that I needed help with things that I didn't necessarily know I needed help with, and then those things have been identified. We're at the point now where I'm trying to understand why I'm so nice, but also as we stand here, I've got 2 columns in my head, and I'm like, oh, this is what the old Steve would do, and this is what the new Steve is supposed to do, but I haven't got a foot in either column yet. I'm sort of standing in the middle of them going, okay, that's what I should be doing. That's what I shouldn't have been doing. That's what I'm still doing. But then sometimes I'm doing these ones. So there's still a bit to go on that, working on myself. But the understanding of what was going on or what reasons are behind it. I guess for the most part, aside from that last sort of 3 years, I've been trying to work out how I can best be that indestructible chopping board.
Steve, for the benefit of our listeners, sorry, Warwick, can you explain to us how the nice guy has been showing up in the business? Like what sort of things has that resulted in?
Giving away a lot of things for free, whether it's materials, probably information, my own knowledge as well. That'd be the most measurable nice guy part, would be the freebies. Probably, and I've never been a yeller, never will be a yeller. I'm never going to chastise staff because they've, I don't know, had 23 and a half minutes for a 20-minute smoker or anything like that. But I also don't pull it up. I don't keep them to the schedule. The nice guy probably doesn't put enough pressure on the work site to make sure that it's tracking as long as what it should be, which again would be a measurable thing because that's how I'm giving away time.
Thank you for being so open. Like sometimes this is challenging to do, but you're one of those rare people that's always open and honest. So for those listeners that haven't really connected the dots yet, that all shows up as a lack of profit in the business. That's what we're losing money by giving away time and materials, not charging for variations, not, driving the boys to hit productivity targets, etc. Unfortunately, that creates a mismatch in what you should be making and what you end up making. So if there's a few of you out there and you're wondering when you look in the bank why there isn't the money that you feel there should be at the end of the week, perhaps it's time to figure out whether you need to be a nice guy. And I'm not saying I don't think you need to be a horrible person to be a good business owner. I think you just need to be fair. And being fair includes being fair to yourself. And unfortunately, we see really frequently with tradies that they tend to put themselves last in order to prevent confrontation or to prevent, some of those challenging or difficult conversations that we need to have as business owners. They'll put themselves last, but that also means putting your family last. And that's something that Steve's been working on quite substantially over the last 12 months, is really making that conscious decision to put his family first every time he has the opportunity to make a choice, because it all comes back to your choice. And at that point of choice, am I going to avoid a confrontation or a difficult conversation and upset my family, or am I going to put my family first and push through some of this hard stuff? Steve's been doing an incredible job of doing some of the hard in the last 12 months or so. And we're seeing a big change now. We're seeing a large shift in your business that has turned around really quite quickly because of being able to say no, where you might have said yes before. Can you explain what sort of differences you're seeing at the moment, Steve?
Certainly on a profit and loss sheet, or even if it's just a graph that the accounting software puts up on the screen, just the trajectory that that's taking. It shows the last 12 months, and the last 12 months has been pretty ordinary. I can blame the rain. The rain's got a lot to do with it, but then being a nice guy on the back of the rain, it adds up. But now it's following a completely different direction. So, everything from doing the back costing variations that I was never doing before, the back costing to find out what I'm giving away for free, the variations to jump on the old, while you're here, can you just do this? And of course I can. Here you go. This is how and why. Previously, and I'm talking, probably earlier this year, even still, like as you said, it's been quite quick. You just go, yeah, sure, we can do that. That's not a problem. We're here anyway. Or change of material to something that's 100 times more expensive and so on. So, yeah, as you said, it adds up quite quickly. Both ways, losing it and then catching it.
That's a good point. And I want to highlight that for our listeners is sometimes it probably feels like turning the Titanic around when you see those bars on your accounting software the wrong way around, and there's more money going out than coming in, or they're shrinking, whatever you're looking at in your business. Hopefully you're looking at something, listeners, and we know you are, Steve, which in itself presents a bit of a headspace challenge, but it can feel like turning the Titanic. But as you've just pointed out, when you put some of these things in place, you can turn that around quite quickly. So all of a sudden we're seeing blue bars depending on your accounting package. And if you string a few of those together, all of a sudden you've made back the 3 months of losses, for example, prior to that in just 3 months. It doesn't take 3 years to claw all that back. Do you find that helpful, or that undoes your head a bit sometimes?
No, helpful, because it's been such a lean 4 or 5 years. I'd always just aimed for that little bit of black, and it didn't bother me if it was $1, as long as it was black. So yeah, absolutely helpful. Aside from having a black number, the amount of profit, whatever it might have been, was irrelevant, because I kind of had in my head that once it was black, then if it's black the next time, then it's more, and then it's black the next time after that, and then so on and so on, and the snowball effect, the tumbleweed that gathers speed, off it goes.
Yeah, it's appropriate for where you are, mate.
I feel like
is there tumbleweeds?
From a client base, we need to, really acknowledge the fact that Steve has just done his first great grey shark. Yep.
Yeah. Come back around. Now, I want to pick up on something not business related, and yet I think it has huge benefit to you in your business, Steve. And we've talked about this a couple times, but I don't feel like we've really grasped the power of your cycling and what that can do for your behavior as a business owner. And listeners are probably going, what the hell is Woz on about? Now he's talking about bikes and business, and in fact, I'm gonna loop something else in here. If anybody's ever heard of a bloke called Lance Armstrong, whether you're into cycling sports and road cycling or not, he wrote a book a bunch of years ago that was titled "It's Not About the Bike," and he probably should have put the subtitle "It's About the Drugs." But it was actually a really good book before all of the scandal and everything else. And I think for many of you listening to this, particularly for the fellas, not to genderize this, but stereotypes are still pretty solid in society, and we have a lot of guys that are on the tools and a lot of ladies who are at home trying to support and keep the fellas making money if that's possible in those situations. But Steve, you're a gun cyclist, and you've improved, I believe, in the last few years in your cycling. You've got some amazing results, and I see a lot of guys who are great at these personal pursuits. They have a hobby or a passion or a sport. They put a lot of effort into, and they get these amazing results, whether it's restoring cars, racing push bikes, whatever it is. And I look at that and go, man, if you could just translate that and the discipline and the thinking that creates those results there to your business life, you'd be absolutely killing it. Am I allowed to say that still? I got banned from Facebook for saying that not that long ago. But anyway, do you make any connection between the two, Steve? In fact, can you tell our listeners a bit about your cycling journey, the evolution of your cycling sports?
Yeah, we can go back to 2008 when I first did my ACL. Then in 2013 when I proper ruptured it and broke the 2 bones going down, and et cetera, et cetera. And,
ouch. Now, how did you do that?
Indoor soccer was how it was originally done.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say, but it was at work the second time. But no, it wasn't. I was just walking up a stair backwards with a wheelbarrow. And then that was the complete rupture, which essentially, like in 2008, I'd stopped playing the ball sports, the basketball, the indoor soccer and so on. 2013 confirmed that I will never run and change direction ever again. And in the years since that, every time we go to a caravan park and I jump on a big Ford jumping pillow, yep, no, I'm not doing that again either. So cycling's it. I always thought I'd wanted to run a marathon eventually, but at 6'1" and 90 odd kilo, running a marathon is not a great idea anyway. So bike riding is sort of the pursuit. Got some really good mates in bike riding that, we spend as much time together as we possibly can, whether it's on a bike or in a camper trailer or whatever it might be. So we've got some good connections in there. And from that, racing has sort of presented itself as the leisurely pursuit. It's not very leisurely at all. And as you say, the training for it isn't leisurely. The discipline that goes into it is not easy, especially in Central Victoria when it decides that 9 degrees is the top for the day and it's only daylight for about 8-9 hours. Long nights and early training and so on and so on. So maybe winter I don't ride as much as what I'd like to, but I'm not a fair weather rider that doesn't show up in winter either. And the result of that is that I'm going better now than probably what I have previously. Consistency, I guess, is probably one of the biggest things that's come out of that. COVID didn't help. The training wasn't there, the racing wasn't there, so there was nothing to train for. So there's been a couple of lean years as far as kilometres per year. You only have to go on Strava to look at it and go, oh, geez, that's a bit shy. But it's one of those ones that if you're really enjoying it, it's easy to get out. Easter Saturday I spent riding up a stupidly steep hill in Merimbula on the south coast of New South Wales and blowing a gale and rain for, 30k of the 85k round trip, and I didn't hate it one bit. So hopefully some more results come my way. It'd be nice. There's a lot of handicap racing, which might make that a little bit harder, but
sure. So can we talk about results for a sec, Steve? Because I think this might be valuable for people listening. So you started your cycling career about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And what's been your best result? Well, explain to our listeners who maybe aren't across the cycling sports, mate. What are you most competitive in? What's your competitive arena?
So criterium is probably where I'm more suited. Can't sprint to save myself, and I'm not very good at going uphill. I like both of them, but there is a bit of DNA behind how you ride a bike. I'm neither a fast twitch muscle fiber person, nor am I 65 kilos. I'm 90 odd kilos. So he's never going to
Picked a
be.
good sport, mate.
Whereas, an A grade crit for 45 minutes on a Wednesday night, I don't know, we've had some rippers this year. 48k an hour is, I might not win the thing, but that's where I'm better suited. It's short and sharp.
This is in a velodrome.
I do track racing. I haven't done that for a couple of years. Then Corona killed that. But no, the crits are, we have our local crit out at the sale yards on a Wednesday night.
Got it.
Massively wide road. It's quiet. There's no trucks. There's no cows. There's no sheep or anything like that. And because it's essentially a closed spot, there's no cars. So the only people coming in are people that are specifically going for a bike race. So safety is a good thing there.
Let's talk results, Steve. This is where you're supposed to brag.
Oh, that's the bit I've been avoiding.
Yeah, I know. You're waffling more than me, mate. Get to the point. What's your best results?
I've won a few crits in my time. I did get one win this year before I got pushed up to A grade. I was riding B grade at the time. Maybe a little bit dominant by the time I'd finished B grade. But I did get, I can't remember, it might have been 3 wins in a row at the end of last year. Throw a road race in there as well. And
now I'm going to jump in here, Steve. Now you're not racing against a bunch of Tasmanian hillbillies.
No.
Because of where you are in Central Victoria, you have some cycling heavy hitters that hang out around where you live, mate. So here's a chance, Steve. This is the therapy session.
Yeah, there's well, they're not current, obviously. We're much older now, but hey, there's Australian road title holders in there. There's guys that have done it for a profession. Bendigo Madison, international Madison riders. One of them got really close to winning one year, and we were rooting for him. He was going well. A bit unfortunate in the end of it, but there's some guys getting around that are their girlfriends / wives may or may not be some of Australia's elite female cyclists, and he's not too shabby himself. So yeah, there's some pretty good quality in the field.
Great. There's a reason I bring that up. You tend to understate your achievements, even in your cycling.
Very much so.
Yes. And this is another common trait that, and I'm trying to do this out because I want those of you listening to this who can identify with this to really just pay attention to how crafty Roonz is at dodging I'm actually really good. I've had some bloody fantastic results up against a strong field. I've won an A grade race, a whole swag of B grade races in an area that, has some stiff competition. I've trained bloody hard and I'm really proud of my results. And I'm pretty sure we'll never hear those words from Steve's mouth. And I know there's plenty of proud tradies out there. Sorry, mate, the internet lag's killing me. There's plenty of proud tradies, but even when you look at the work that you do, the landscaping projects that you do, I know you've mentioned this before as well, Steve, or not. There's an avoidance of celebrating your own success. And yet, as you've just pointed out with your cycling, you've trained super hard. You've put a lot of time into it. It takes a lot of discipline. And not surprisingly, you're getting the results despite being a monster of a man on a push bike that weighs about as much as a teacup. And so I wonder if you ever think about bringing that headspace and discipline and everything from the bike into your business.
Yeah. But I'd almost say that, kind of like what you're saying, that I'm very unlikely to say how proud I am of the results. I guess that's the nice guy coming back into it as well. I don't know if it's I don't feel comfortable telling people how good I am, but I've never necessarily been exposed to somebody who does that well either. Often, like, I listen to a few landscaping podcasts, and it's quite obvious the guys that know they're really good, obviously know that themselves, but also have a good network of, perhaps other landscapers and stuff like that, probably they've known since trade school or something like that. They might have known for 20 or 30 years or something. When I did trade school, it was me, myself and Irene, and it was on site, and you never met anybody else that you did it with and all that kind of thing. It was a bit disjointed. So I don't have other landscapers around that I grew up with per se. And then, of course, because I've come into cycling late, I haven't grown up with other cyclists that have been doing it since their junior years, that have, they might have won a few classics and that kind of thing. And, there's the accolades there. So me coming in late and doing landscaping essentially by myself, I find it hard to say, or I suppose present the fact that I'm actually kind of good at it, at both of them, sort of. Even then, sort of.
Kind of good at it.
Always putting yourself back, Steve.
Yeah.
It is somewhat the Australian way, I think, to be overly humble. And, I don't actually think that it serves us well. We've been working together 3 years and I had no idea that you were that good. Knew you were good, didn't know you were that good. Well, that's incredible. And I see you do that time and time again. So for the listeners' benefit, we start our coaching sessions with an opportunity to share some good news personally and good news professionally. And Steve finds that hard at times, and you're not alone. In fact, most of our male clients particularly find that really challenging. And yet you have some kick-ass wins every single time in business and personally. And it's challenging for that to be the first thing that comes to your head. And we're working really hard on that headspace. You've been doing some amazing stuff to bring that to, I guess, a easier space. And I think it's really important to point out that even though you are as good as you are, which is flipping incredible, I'll never give you shit about wearing Lycra again. It's still so far down the list for you. It's just incredible to see that, it's just not the focus for you. And I think that some of that is being humble and some of it is just not acknowledging the journey that you've been on and the change that you've made. So we'll be your cheer squad and we'll keep bringing it up and poking you in the chest and making sure that we make sure everybody in our community base understands how good you are. So we won't be having bike races at Men's Retreat this year. And I'll never ride my cruiser anywhere near you because you'll just go. I'm not designed for a bike. Let's put it that way.
Well, Lisa won't come riding. She goes, "You won't ride with me."
Yeah, you ride too fast up the road. Everyone's stuck behind you.
Got to keep up with you.
Steve, you've got some big things coming over the next 12 months, 2 years. You're making some change. A lot of that starting with your headspace. Why don't you tell our listeners what sort of things or you're working on, what you'd like to see change in the business?
Yeah, more and more off-site. That would be the easiest way to describe what I need to do as far as the business is concerned. Yeah, that sort of year, 2 years, 3 years. If it takes 3 years to get all 5 days, then so be it. Obviously, been pretty clear in understanding what off-site means. Doesn't mean that I'm playing golf and going bike riding either. Because, and in all honesty, working with you guys has sort of opened up my eyes, has let me know what business stuff needs to be done, that doing it at 10 o'clock at night is foolish because you're going to miss stuff. You might have a good quoting program, which I've, jumped into now and all that kind of thing, but trying to do stuff that relates to figures when you're dog tired at 2 o'clock in the morning is and you've been working on site all day is stupid. So making sure that I've got that now at the moment 2 days in the office, and they're both pretty full days. I rarely leave the computer screen. I usually have sore eyes by the end of it. But then over that next sort of year or two is adding the days and then probably spreading out the days. So I'm not necessarily staring at a computer the whole time. Maybe go see the boys at site. But then, of course, the flip side of that is that stuff on site will probably change a little bit as well. Roles will progress. The boys will get, I don't know, more responsibility, and there might be more staff that need to be brought into it and that kind of thing. to cover the fact that other people on site will have more responsibility than not being able to do perhaps what they're doing right now. Everybody sort of needs to, I suppose, everybody's sort of stepping up, because then there'll be another junior or something like that that'll come in underneath, and they've got to get trained by someone. So you can't just all have everybody on the same level digging a hole. There's more to it than that. So yeah, there's a bit to come.
Steve, if there's one thing that you feel continuously gets in the way of you getting the results that you're chasing, what do you think it is?
Me being a nice guy. That would be the fair answer. And I often, and in our coaching sessions before, what's the blockage? Me. And it's usually because, if I'm, I don't know, you could use an excuse. It could be tired, it could be stressed, or it could be, missing something somewhere. And the instant thing to do is, oh yeah, it'll be right. We'll just do it. It'll be fine. No worries. As opposed to, thinking maybe a little bit more consciously on the impacts of doing that. So the short answer is me being too nice.
I think that's incredibly beneficial for those who are listening. There's so many that we see, they create their own frustrations by being too nice because it's hard to confront stuff. And I think it's a great note to really round out the episode on, is just how you can still be a nice guy and be in control of the direction your business is going in a healthy and positive way. One thing I did want to point out, in making some of those changes that you're making with your team and taking away the nice guy, you've still got all the same team, right? Thank you for
didn't all pack up and walk out. Yeah.
Nope. Which is another fear we stumble across quite a bit, that we'll lose customers, or they won't want to work with me, or my team will leave if I get a bit tighter on productivity and what they're doing with their time. And yet time and time again, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. And I think, not to try and drag out the potty any more than it needs to, I think I've worked pretty hard on making a culture site that the boys want to come to work to.
Absolutely.
And there was a conscious, we don't have to be too nice about it. It's not an extension of my nice guy personality. It's just I need to make this a good place to come to work, irrespective of how I'm feeling. That just needs to be a good spot. And the boys have said so, that this is a desirable place to work. So it must be, to some degree, effective.
I was looking for a job. I know where I'm
your
coming.
achievements again.
Yeah.
Mate, I think you would probably give the same answer to the 1,000 tradies in a room. One piece of advice, it's probably don't be a nice guy, but I'll let you have a chop at it instead, mate.
See if I can come up with something else. I don't know. I could be cliche. Know your numbers. Back cost. And it's probably
just sound like us, Steve.
It's probably be fair. Obviously what I'm sort of working through and towards, I'm not there. But as you've said before, you don't have to be nasty. You don't have to be a pig of a boss or a horrible customer service representative of your business or anything like that. But if you're fair, most people are expecting fair. They're not expecting nice. They're expecting fair. And so what fair looks like could be different for everybody. It could be, here is a fair price for the fair job that we're getting. Of course, from Living Edge, you don't just get a fair job, you get the best.
Yes, you
do. But if when somebody wants to make a change to their design or to their materials or anything like that, they're not looking for someone nice to go, yeah, we'll do that for you, that's no worries. They're looking for a fair and reasonable charge. They're not looking for it for free. And if they are, they're not the clients you wanted, and you need to redo your avatar.
You.
Nice work, mate. What a way to finish it off.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, Steve, you're an absolute legend of a man, mate. We love working with you, and I feel privileged that you continue to trust us to support you through your growth and development as a business owner and as a man. And I think, you know, the hard things that you have tackled and overcome in business, in cycling, in your life in general, and there's some stuff we haven't talked about even on the podcast that Nick and I are privy to. I think all of that stuff means that you actually end up earning the right to expect a little more for yourself. And I know there's a lot of people listening to this that are probably in the same boat. They've worked damn hard. They do the right thing by people all the time. And it's actually okay to enjoy the spoils. You know, you're allowed to feel good about achievement. You're allowed to actually have the benefits come to you. It's not a bad thing. You know, sacrificing oneself doesn't actually get you any medals. You know, the people that are standing on the top step at the cycling worlds, or, you know, the Olympics, or in business, they're celebrating their success because they're allowing it to come to them. And so I think for you, mate, I'm really looking forward to seeing more success come to you in the next year or three. And want to thank you for sharing with our listeners, mate. It's been great chatting with you today on the pod.
Thanks, Steve.